Today's episode is all about delivering a brand strengthening interview. And this is a huge piece of podcast guesting and why it is so incredibly valuable for your company and for your brand. So first, we just want to talk a little bit about visibility and why building a brand is so valuable and such an important thing for you to focus on.
So yeah, this goes beyond just how to be a good podcast guest, right? We've done episodes about that. We do trainings on that, but this is really about strengthening your brand, making sure these interviews are strengthening your brand, your company brand. So number one, visibility is oxygen to your business. So obscurity is the most dangerous thing for your business. If people don't know who you are, you will not get leads. You will not get chosen over your competitors. So that's first and foremost, just actually doing the podcast interviews, going on other people's shows so you're getting visibility is number one. Because you really, I would argue, don't have a brand if nobody knows who you are. And there's so much noise online, and so many leads will forget about you when they need you if you aren't visible. And if you've been in business for a while, you'll have a lead that meets you, that maybe goes through one of your trainings or has a call with you and they don't sign up, but then they come back 6 months or a year later when they're ready. And if you're not visible, they're not going to come back because they won't know where to find you. So that's first and foremost. And I just want to share a quick story. In one of our recent episodes, you heard from Mark Willis, certified financial planner. He was previously going to libraries and doing workshops and seminars to hustle for clients in his local area, going out at dinner time in the snow, like spending time away from his family. And by going on podcasts and getting visibility virtually online, he's been able to really grow his business tremendously and have a much easier time doing it because he's not having to go out and hustle in person. So you can really skyrocket your visibility. And again, that is the most important part. You don't have a brand if nobody knows who you are. So number one, you need to be getting out there and getting visible as a guest on podcasts.
Yes. And the value of building a brand is huge. There is a difference between building a business and building a brand. And like Jess said, a lot of it has to do with visibility. If you build an incredible 8-figure company, but nobody knows who you are, maybe they know the name of your company, but they don't know who you are, you haven't really built a brand. And that is a personal brand. You could also talk about the brand of your company as well. You should have both. Both should be established brands in the marketplace. It really is the difference between being a service provider and being an authority figure. When you have a strong brand, your brand is working for you. So it's not your hustle that translates into business success. You have this brand out there working for you. It's establishing credibility. It's your insurance policy when you build a personal brand. If you decide to sell your company, if you decide to start a different company, sometimes it can feel like that will never happen, but life is long, things happen. And when you have a strong brand, it's easy for you to pivot into doing something new because even if you haven't established yourself in that marketplace, you have established your brand as an authority, as someone to be trusted. So when you build your brand, you're communicating your vision and the impact that you're having, your company's having on the world versus just selling and pitching your product. And that's why podcast interviews are so valuable, right? Because it's not just an infomercial. You are really sharing yourself, sharing what you're about. And the best brands, it doesn't have to do with the colors or the logos of the brands. It has to do with the story behind it. And we're going to go more into the storytelling aspect of delivering a brand strengthening interview. But when you do podcast interviews, there are new people listening to your episodes all the time. New people who didn't know who you are now do. So your brand is growing and building even while you're sleeping, while you're on vacation, right? The brand is working for you. And that is a really powerful place to be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I want to share a quick example because we just signed on a new client recently who, because we have a strong brand, because we're visible, our content and our podcasts and our interviews essentially did the sales work for us. right? This person, went through one of our launches and for months was consuming our content, like following us on social media. So then when we reached out to her, she was pretty much ready to go. So really, I want to just highlight that fact that when you have a strong brand and when you're visible, you will be nurturing and essentially closing new sales without having to do like one by one heavy lifting in your sales process. The other reason that building your brand and having brand strengthening interviews online working for you is that you will get rid of price shoppers. So we have experienced this time and time again. We have a really strong brand. We are consistent with our podcast guesting. We are sharing about our values. We're sharing about our vision. We share our own story, right? We talk about personal development. We talk about transformation. We talk about all these topics out, aside next to podcast guesting, because that is a part of our brand. That's part of what we believe in. And because of that, we're able to attract and close sales with clients who are aligned with those values. So by sharing your vision and sharing your values, you have people that won't be price shopping. They won't be comparing you line by line with your competitors because they will value you and want to work with you because not just what you offer and the service you're delivering, but of who you are. Right? People, my dad taught me this like years ago when he was coaching me. He said, people will really want to work with you for you. And that is so, so true. So this is all great, but if you are not consistent and if you are not frequently getting visibility for your brand, again, it's like if a tree falls in the forest, did it make a sound if nobody could hear it? If you have a great brand, but if nobody knows who you are and it's not visible, who cares? It's not actually going to have an impact on your sales and your revenue. People are not going to work with you if they don't know who you are. And so you need to be consistently getting yourself on podcasts to share this, because I will say that the more you do podcast interviews, the better you get. You will get clarity on your vision, on your values, on your brand, the more you're interviewed about it. And this happens all the time. Like anytime Margie's on a podcast, she's coming to me right afterwards, like with more clarity around the messaging and because of the questions and the way people were asking questions and what they were most interested in. So you have to be consistent with your podcast guesting because that in and of itself will strengthen your brand. How consistent do you need to be? 4 per month, an interview a week. This needs to be a part of your weekly marketing strategy. Every single week, you should be on a podcast because when you are consistent with your podcast guesting, you will be generating leads and revenue every single month, whether you're launching or not. So if you don't want to be launch dependent, you have to be consistent with your visibility.
Yeah. And before I dive into the how-to aspect of how to deliver a brand strengthening interview, I just want to touch on what Jess said, or what her dad, Jim Palmer, said about people want to work with you for you. The power of building a strong brand is that at a certain point of growth, you are not working with people individually. Right? When people work with Interview Connections for our agency side, they're working with our amazing team. So yes, people want to work with you for you, but as you grow, people want to work with you to be part of your brand because it occurs as an opportunity, because you've built trust. So they know that the standard you're playing at, your team is going to be exceptional. So I want to add that because that's a really big piece of having a strong brand is you have that freedom to step out of some of the day-to-day service delivery if that's not where you want to be. And you still have that trust because the brand still has that value in the market and that strength, even if you're not actually serving people all the time, because you need to stay in your zone of genius, running your company, creating content, all that. So how do you actually deliver an interview that strengthens your brand? Number one, you really need to share the real you. You need to be yourself. And I'm not saying you need to overshare or share something that you don't feel ready to share or you're not comfortable sharing. Absolutely not. This will look different for everyone. So trust yourself. But it's really important that people get to know you, that you share who you are, your journey, where you've come from. And that is why podcast guesting is so incredibly valuable, because somebody can see your logo everywhere or your Facebook ads all the time. And that is an aspect of building your brand, right? But they're not, that is going wide, not deep. And brand building isn't just about being everywhere. Brand building is about that depth, that people really getting to know and trust your brand on a deep level. In order for that to happen, you have to share the real you. So when I'm on podcasts, yes, I'm talking about the value of, being a podcast guest and how you monetize it, but I'm also talking about my personal story of losing my dad to suicide, of cleaning up the hoarded house, of, the importance that conversations about grief and loss have to me. And that's why I started We Get It, Your Dad Died, the podcast, to create that space for healing and for these conversations. So all of that is part of the brand building that I'm doing. And it's not this super calculated, like, I'm going to build my brand, so I'm going to share this, this, and this. The beauty of building a brand is it's so much easier than people think. It's about getting out there consistently and then being honest, telling real stories so people get to know you and understand your values and your why and who you are, and that they can trust you.
Yeah, people make emotional decisions when they're buying. They have the analytical part of their brain where they say, does this person have credibility? Are they going to give me what I need? Am I going to see an ROI? Like there's those just tactical, like tangible, analytical, stuff that people do. But ultimately, what gets people to pull the trigger and say, yes, I'm going to work with you, it is an emotional tie to that company and to the person that they're talking to. And so that is why sharing your story is so important. And I've had leads tell me this, like exactly on the phone. One of our clients was like, okay, I have the, analytical part of my brain and the emotional part of my brain. And I'm going to really trust the emotional part of my brain that says, like, this is the right fit. So you have to give people that warm and fuzzy feeling that there's like a good connection there. And I was just coaching a client yesterday about this. This particular client that I was working with has like incredible credibility, like up the wazoo, perfect education, like lots of experience. But the focus that we were talking about that he was aware of as well was that like intimacy, that emotion, really sharing the stories that have potential clients say, yes, like I really feel like there's a good connection here, because they might know that he is like has the right expertise and service, but people also have to feel it. So how do you do that? You do that through strategic topics and questions that tee you up to share those stories and to share that expertise. So your topics and questions have to be unique to you. They have to position you as an expert. They have to communicate your credibility and your knowledge, and they have to position you and tee you up to share the stories that are going to have people feel those warm and fuzzy feelings. So I want to give a couple of examples. One of our incredible clients, her name is Vasavi Kumar. I recently did a breakthrough call with her and we talked about her topics and questions, and she has great speaking topics. So if you're a speaker and you have speaking topics, that's a great place to start. You will want to tweak those for your podcast one sheet, because podcast interview topics and questions are going to be phrased a little bit differently to a speaking topic and question, or a speaking topic rather. So just going to give you the examples of like the before and after. So the before, the speaking topic she had was confidence. And we rephrased that. We dove a little bit deeper to make it more unique and more explicit to her unique value. And we wrote cultivating self-trust and acceptance so that you energetically attract your ideal dream clients. So this is all about confidence, but we wanted to write it in a way that is so unique to her special approach. Another example is that she has an interview topic. A speaking topic, embracing imposter syndrome. And so asking her more about that and how she approaches that, we came up with the podcast one sheet topic of imposter syndrome is the key to cleaning up the mess you're hiding, which is a great hook. It's super interesting. It is about imposter syndrome, but it's more specific and unique to what she would talk about. And then lastly, storytelling. And we just dove a little bit deeper and wrote how to change your personal narrative so you become a more magnetic storyteller. So look at your interview topics and questions. Can they be spruced up? Can they be phrased in a way that really tees you up to share your story and expertise?
All right. The next part of delivering a brand strengthening interview. So we talked about number one, sharing the real you. So being authentic, sharing your story in a way that is comfortable for you, but also lets people understand, kind of lets them into who you are, what you value, what your why is. Great topics and questions, super important for your one sheet for a podcast. And that is something we make for our clients and we strategize with them on their topics and questions. But the examples Jess gave were really good. So if you don't have topics and questions, definitely you need some. If you have some and it's probably time to make them more interesting, take that part, make some tweaks and see how it goes and see if the interviews are more interesting. The third part is telling stories. This is really important. So you have your topics and questions. You should go through your questions and have a story, at least one story in mind for each question. You never want to just answer the question and just either give a short answer, because then the host is going to hate interviewing you. It's going to be like pulling teeth. If you're just like, yep, or yep, they should do that. I found that, blah, blah, blah. And you also don't want to tell people, right? You want to show, don't tell. So if you're, if the host is like, oh, so why should people be interviewed on podcasts? Oh, well, because it's a great brand building strategy and it helps you get more clients. That would be a really boring answer, right? And it wouldn't be super compelling. So there's opportunities for stories. It could be case studies. It could be stories about your clients that you can sneak in. It could be stories about your personal experience. But for every question, come up with at least one story that you could answer the question in. This will help it not only be more compelling for the listeners, but people have an easier time remembering stories than they do remembering just cut and dry information. So people will remember you, you'll stick in their mind, which is what we want. If you aren't used to storytelling, a really good exercise is writing out your stories. And this isn't because you need to memorize them or because you're going to read them out over the podcast. Please don't do that. But if you have your key stories that you know these questions are going to queue you up for, you can write them out. And that is a good exercise because it helps you see which details are maybe extraneous and you don't need. It helps you look at, where do I want to drop people into in this story? Do I want to be chronological, or do I want to drop them in the middle and really describe what this moment was like and then backtrack? So there's a lot of ways you can do this. You can have fun with it. If you aren't an expert storyteller, that's okay. You will get better and better, but just make that effort. And if you need that exercise of writing it out and practicing that way, definitely do it. The biggest mistakes I see people make, they're either self-conscious or nervous, or they feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself too much or be too long-winded. And then they just breeze over stories. And if you just give people like an overview of a story, that doesn't really count as telling a story. That doesn't drop people into the moment with you. So the difference would be, oh yeah, this happened and this happened and that happened, but now everything's fine in this, or just, you want to go deep. And when you're dropping people deep into a story, you're really bringing them into the feelings of that moment. So instead of saying, yeah, I lost my business to bankruptcy and blah, 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 blah. If that's the key story for that question, don't be afraid to drop people into that moment. Like that moment where you opened your bank account and you realized you needed to declare bankruptcy. Like, how did that feel? Where were you? What did it look like? What did it sound like? What did it smell like? Like, you can really bring people in and it will make it more powerful. And yes, you may end up saying too much and then you want to like reel it in because you don't want it to be super long, but most people err on the side of not detailed enough. So just think of this, think of dropping people into what that was really like for you so that they'll be able to relate. The next thing is serving and giving real value. That is huge. To strengthen your brand, you have to be delivering value every time you are speaking. And especially for podcast interviews and this free content that you're making, if you have a mentality of, well, I don't want to give them too much information because then they won't need to work with me, or you have to buy my book to learn this, like, give freely. When you have that abundant mindset of wanting to serve and wanting to give value, people will be drawn to you. Your brand will be so trusted and so strengthened. So really approach free speaking opportunities, not just with a goal of like, okay, I talk about this stuff all the time, so this will be easy, but like, how can I make this the most valuable talk about this that I've ever done, even if I talk about this topic all the time? And when you go into prepping for opportunities like that, it will be so much better and you will get such better results. Our client, Kristen Bowen, she is so great. She's seen a great ROI from podcast interviews. And it's not a coincidence that the way she approaches it is she acts like everyone in the audience paid $10,000 to hear her speak. $10,000. And these are podcasts, they're free. But when you show up like Kristen Bowen is and deliver that value as if people invested so much to hear it, people know it, they appreciate it, and it strengthens your brand. It will lead to more leads and clients. It is such a win-win when you have that mentality.
So to wrap this up, you need to stay consistent, because the more consistent you are with your podcast guesting, the stronger your brand will be and the more people will know about your brand. So keep getting out there, keep getting interviewed, and focus on really showing up so your business and working with you occurs as an opportunity. That is the sign of a really strong brand, when people are so excited to be a part of your community.
Yeah. And don't let perfection hold you back, right? Like, we're giving a lot of tips here, but I don't want you to say, oh my gosh, I don't know if my topics and questions or my stories are going to be good enough, so I'm just not going to get out there because I don't know if it's going to strengthen your brand. The biggest thing that will hurt your brand is not getting out there. It will be imperfect. You will get better as you go. So regardless of how confident you feel, be brave, get out there, start the momentum, and it will get stronger and stronger as you go.